Iso throws hot coffee in his eyes. As he howls, Iso vows to destroy Jang Jie and leaves, slapping her so hard she crumples to the ground. Demanding her phone, Gunwon couches down to hit her again. Iso laughs that they're in Itaewon and turns to the gathering crowd of expats, tearfully begging for help. A handful of men step up to Iso's defense, but Gunwon cockily throws a handful of cash in the air. The crowd confusedly picks up the bills as Gunwon spits that money solves problems anywhere, before taking a fist to the face. Sei Roi helps an overjoyed Iso to her feet, and she excitedly tells him that she got Gunwon's confession. He doesn't even seem to hear her as he stares at her bloodied lip, gently asking what happened to her face. Iso winces and Sei Roi advances on Gunwon, demanding if he's responsible. Gunwon confirms he did it, and taunts Sei Roi to punch him again. Fury burning in his eyes, Sei Roi glares at Gunwon, but before he can do anything, Iso grabs his arm and snaps him back to his senses. Police sirens wail and Gunwon tries to flee, but the expats block his path. He's sullen as he is hauled away in the patrol car, and Iso tells Sei Roi to let it go. Sei Roi asks if she's okay, and Iso cheerfully says that seeing him worried and angry over her is enough for her. Patting her hair, Sei Roi apologizes and pulls Iso into a hug. The next day, Iso's post goes viral, incurring public outrage. President Jang brutally slaps his son, fuming at Gunwon for hitting Iso when he was told to hire her. Gunwon can only mumble weak apologies as President Jang hits him again and again, cursing his stupidity. President Jang sighs when Gunwon flinches and declares him not even worthy a beating. Dismissed, Gunwon leaves and is immediately approached by Minyoung. She's sympathetic and says that he was wrong, but what's done is done. Patting his shoulder, Minyoung promises Gunwon that the company will resolve matters into President Jang's office. She recommends he dismiss Gunwon immediately, warning that when his involvement is revealed, it will no longer be just a family issue. President Jang wonders suspiciously how Minyoung knows, and she points out that Iso uploaded Gunwon's confession. As Gunwon was a teen at the time, it would be impossible for him to handle it alone. Over at Dambam, Sungkwan and Hyunhee were just as blindsided as President Jang and admit they're unsure how to act now. Iso coolly retorts that they should do their jobs and Sei Roi agrees. Hojin calls, and when Sei Roi goes to meet him and Minyoung, he brings Iso. Minyoung is unhappy Iso's video negatively impacted Jang Jie's stocks, but Iso nonchalantly says it would have happened anyway when Minyoung replaces President Jang. Iso asserts that the current situation is ideal for usurping President Jang since stockholders will be furious at the Jang family. Iso warns that it could easily backfire, however, and declares there are two conditions they must meet. Jumping to the following morning, Detective O admits his shame to Haiwon. Sei Roi and Minyoung arrive to see Detective O, but he's frantically searching for Haiwon that ran out at the news. They split up and thankfully, Haiwon is quickly located at the park. Sobbing, Haiwon says she feels bad for Sei Roi, but that she doesn't want her father to be taken from her. Minyoung gently explains that it takes a lot of courage to take responsibility for a mistake and Haiwon should be proud of Detective O. Embracing his daughter, Detective O apologizes and vows to be an honorable person. Flashing back, we see that Iso's first condition was to get Gunwon charged for his crime against Dad, which is why Sei Roi and Minyoung had come to get Detective O to turn himself in. Sure enough, Gunwon pulls up to the courthouse amidst a crowd of reporters vying for a statement. Muttering that he'll cooperate with the investigation, Gunwon disappears inside. Across town, Iso declares the first condition has been met, but tells the others they now need to figure out President Jang's intentions. If he chooses to protect his son, or even remain silent, but she says if President Jang abandons his Gunwon, they might as well give up. Hojin tries to argue they still have stocks and Minyoung's supporters, but Iso asserts that choosing the company over his son will appease the stockholders. Sei Roi is confident President Jang will abandon Gunwon and suggests they try to gather evidence against President Jang as a backup. Hojin points out that President Jang was thorough in the past, so there's nothing to be found. However, Hojin believes President Jang will never abandon Gunwon, so Minyoung agrees to wait and see. At Jang Jie HQ, Gunwon's lawyer announces that Iso's recording was dismissed, so there's no doubt Gunwon will be released on lack of evidence. Gunwon sighs relief and President Jang barks that Jang Jie took a huge hit thanks to this chaos. He dismisses Gunwon and the lawyer but holds Suah back. Once they're alone, Suah says he should abandon Gunwon. President Jang argues that Gunwon will be off scot-free, but Suah argues that the damage is enough for Minyoung to steal his seat. President Jang tells her he was born the eldest of 4 children. His youngest sibling starved to death while the remaining 2 died from eating rotten food in the streets. President Jang, I built Jang Jie Company so that my family could eat good food and will never have to starve again. He says he'll never abandon his son and explains that this scandal caused only half the damage as Gunwon's incident 8 years ago, which stabilized in 6 months. President Jang's confidence comes from his confidence that Jang Jie foods are delicious. He further asserts that Min-young knows better than betray him because he's the only person who can represent Jang. Ga-sua apologizes and President Jang levels a glare at her. Don't you dare tell me to abandon my family ever again. Outside, Min-young's spy texts her a play-by-play of the conversation. Satisfied, Min-young pushes forward with the plan. That evening, Gun-won explodes when he sees the notice of the proposal for President Jang's dismissal. He crashes the meeting and screams at Min-young for attacking President Jang, who's done nothing wrong. Min-young barks back that President Jang appointed an incompetent fool like Gun-won as a director. Gun-won tries to argue she promised to help, and Min-young reiterates that she'd said the company would handle it, and they are. Gun-won wanders out dejectedly and runs into Soo-ah. She tells him she'd advised President Jang to dismiss Gun-won, but he'd chosen to protect his son. She stalks off, leaving Gun-won even more shaken. Meanwhile, Gun-soo reads the news articles and admits to Hyunhee that he feels conflicted about his father's dismissal. He wonders how he can feel that way knowing what President Jang did to Se-ro-lee, but Hyunhee thinks it's normal since President Jang is still his father. They return downstairs where Iso is explaining the dismissal to Sung-kwon. Hyunhee coughs loudly and Sung-kwon clams up, but Se-ro-lee openly admits they were discussing President Jang. Your dad is my enemy. Se-ro-lee continues that he'll do anything to make President Jang pay for his sins and to surpass him in business. Se-ro-lee tells Gun-soo that he won't change his plan over Gun-soo's feelings. I'm sure you also don't want me to do things that I don't mean, pointing out that despite knowing everything, Gun-soo chose to stay at Danbam. Choking back tears, Gun-soo glances at Iso and then excuses himself for some air. Iso says that this too was bound to happen. Outside, Gun-soo thinks to himself that he agrees with Se-ro-lee, admitting he was actually impressed. Recalling Iso's teasing words that if Gun-soo wants her, he should take over Jang Ga, so you're saying it's okay for me to want you, right? The following morning, Gun-won visits President Jang before heading to the prosecutor's office. He informs his father that the lawyer prepared a statement, and he should be able to return to work tomorrow. President Jang interjects that he spent his life building Jang Ga, musing Jang Dae-hee, and Jang Ga company itself. He declares that no one can drive him out and tells his son to handle his own business and not worry about his father. Gun-won goes to leave, but President Jang continues that he'd always disciplined Gun-won in order to hand Jang Ga over someday. He laments that as a father, he's never once hugged his son. He pulls Gun-won into an embrace and Gun-won cries at the first expression of affection in his life. President Jang tells him to get going and Gun-won leaves. To Soo-ah's confusion, President Jang says they should be heading out too. In the lobby, Jung-won runs into Se-ro-lee, who explains he's here to cast his shareholder vote for President Jang's dismissal. Se-ro-lee thanks Gun-won. I couldn't see the end of it, but thanks to you, it seems possible. Enraged, Gun-won nearly punches Se-ro-lee, but Secretary Kim warns him not to make matters worse. Gun-won spits that he and his father aren't people Se-ro-lee can mess with and storms out. The Danbam crew wait anxiously for news and Sung-kwon says it's good Gun-soo has the day off. Hyunhee suddenly freezes and shows them something on her phone. Turns out President Jang is holding a press conference. To the crowded room of reporters, President Jang passionately tells them that he's here as a father, not a chairman. Explaining that Gun-won will be found not guilty for lack of evidence, President Jang shocks everyone by announcing that Gun-won confessed to him after the first hearing. In her office, Min-young declares they're doomed. President Jang continues to sob crocodile tears to the reporters. Gun-won orders Secretary Ki to stop the car while President Jang wails that he looked into the case and confirmed Gun-won's guilt. At a stoplight, Gun-won takes the opportunity to jump out of the car, racing back to his father and losing his tie in the process. President Jang admits he hesitated, but upon learning the truth, he turned all the evidence over to the prosecutors. Overwhelmed, Se-ro-lee runs to the bathroom to be sick. Meanwhile, Soo-ah looks on through tears as President Jang lies. To the victim who passed away because of my son and his family, I sincerely apologize. We will regret it for the rest of our lives. President Jang bows deeply, finally kneeling on the podium as Soo-ah covers her mouth in distress. Afterwards, President Jang leaves through a throng of avid reporters just as Gun-won arrives at the location. The men stare at each other for a charged moment as Gun-won realizes what President Jang's hug meant. Tears slide down his face, and President Jang gets into a car and leaves. Accepting his abandonment, Gun-won admits to the reporters that everything is his fault. Heartbreakingly, President Jang's dismissal is rejected. Later, Min-young sits in President Jang's office and he coolly informs her he holds no grudge. He believes she did it all for Jang Ga and reveals he's been aware of her spy in his office. President Jang sighs that Min-young must be disappointed, but she corrects that she merely underestimated him. He continues that he's disappointed but won't kick her out because her father was his partner. Instead, he's exiling her to the pageant office to clear her head. Se-ro-lee meets Min-young and Ho-jin at Jang Ga's pub that evening. Ho-jin apologizes guiltily and Min-young shushes him. Se-ro-lee asks what she'll do now and Min-young pouts that her supporters have all been ousted and she has not choice but to do as she's told. She asks what Se-ro-lee's plans are, and he says he'll find another way. She's surprised he's not giving up when the odds are stacked against him, and Se-roi points out they always have been. He says that despite their failure, Gunwon will still pay for his crime, and President Jang lost a son. Min-young pouts that she lost everything, and Se-roi agrees. She lost, but he didn't. She tuts that he really can be a jerk, and her eyes fall on Dad's watch. Min-young recognizes it, and Se-roi admits he wears it whenever he has something important to do. Min-young continues that during the 1997 IMF financial crisis, Min-young confirms that it wouldn't be an understatement to say Jang Jie wouldn't be where it is without the special sauce. Marketing always needs a good story. It's more compelling to say that it was developed by the chairman, not a mere employee. Se-roi is confused, and Min-gun reveals it was Mr. Park who made this sauce. It's the dish developed by Mr. Park. And what he got in return for giving credit to the chairman is this watch. She growls that Dad should have been the last person kicked out of Jang-ga. Min-young agrees that she's the one who lost today and thinks Se-roi will do better. She tells him to hold out his hand and slaps it. I've passed the baton, Min-young announces. Make sure to win, Se-roi. President Jang and Se-roi both attend Gunwon's hearing where he's declared guilty and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Gun-soo is led away, and Se-roi looks thoughtfully at Dad's watch before standing to leave as well. President Jang calls after him, assuming Se-roi is now satisfied. Not at all, Se-roi retorts. You're sitting comfortably right there. President Jang commends him for teaming with Min-young, but that Jang Jie won't fall apart easily. Se-roi questions whether the company is worth abandoning his son, and President Jang says he'll do anything for Jang-ga. He admits he still feels bitter, and Se-roi points out Gunwon is just paying for his crime. President Jang growls that Se-roi is crossing the line, but Se-roi's expression remains calm as he says President Jang is next. Finally admitting that Se-roi is his enemy, President Jang vows to make him regret it. I will offer my life to make the same promise, Se-roi counters. Later, Se-roi visits Dad's grave, apologizing for not coming sooner. He says he was a bad son that went to jail without finishing the funeral and felt too guilty to visit. He lays the paper reporting Gun-soo's sentence next to the grave and kneels, saying that while he may be a bad son, he has a lot of good people around him. Se-roi pours a drink for Dad and himself, telling him not to worry anymore and rest in peace. Taking the shot, Se-roi once more hears Dad asking how it tastes. Through tears, Se-roi says, it's still bitter.